The words hit me like ice water. Brandon, she's just embarrassing, completely unfit to marry into our family. Diane's voice carried across the restaurant, clear and deliberate. Every conversation at nearby tables stopped. The waiter froze mid-step. My fork clattered against my plate. I felt my cheeks burn as 20 strangers turned to stare. But what hurt most wasn't the public humiliation. It was watching my fiancé's face. Brandon stared at his pasta, jaw tight, saying absolutely nothing. Not one word in my defense. Diane continued, her voice softer now but somehow more cutting. I mean, look at her. The way she talks, the way she carries herself. She doesn't understand our world, Brandon. She never will. My throat felt dry. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my water glass. This wasn't just criticism. This was a surgical strike designed to make me disappear. And Brandon's silence felt like agreement. I realized in that moment that I was sitting at a table for 3, that I was completely alone. The engagement ring on my finger suddenly felt heavy. Wrong, like it belonged to someone else entirely. My name is Riley. I'm 28 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I believed I was planning the happiest day of my life. I work as a 3rd-grade teacher in downtown Portland. I drive a Honda Civic that's 7 years old, but reliable. I shop at Target, not designer stores. I grew up believing love meant standing up for each other. My parents weren't rich, but when someone criticized my mom, my dad would step in immediately. "That's my wife you're talking about," he'd say, calm but firm. I thought Brandon felt the same way. When he proposed 4 months ago, he said I made him want to be better. He said my kindness and warmth were exactly what his family needed. He made it sound like I was a gift, not a problem. But sitting in that restaurant, watching him study his food while his mother tore me apart, I understood something terrible. Love without protection isn't love. It's just wishful thinking. I had spent 8 months trying to win over a woman who decided I was the enemy before we even met. And I had been dating a man who would let his mother destroy me rather than risk an awkward conversation. The first warning came 3 months after Brandon and I started dating. We were at his parents' house for Sunday dinner. Diane handed me a glass of wine and smiled. "This is a lovely vintage, probably more expensive than what you're used to, but don't worry, you'll learn." The words felt friendly on the surface, but underneath was something sharp. A test. A reminder that I didn't belong. I laughed it off. "Thank you, it's delicious." Brandon squeezed my hand under the table, and I thought he was being supportive. Now I realize he was probably just relieved I hadn't made a scene. Later that night, I mentioned it to him carefully. "Your mom's comment about the wine felt a little pointed." He kissed my forehead. "She's just particular about things. She doesn't mean anything by it." But I caught something in his voice, a practiced dismissal. Like he'd given this exact response before. I should have paid attention to that tone. I should have asked who else had been on the receiving end of his mother's particular comments. Instead, I convinced myself I was being oversensitive. That was my first mistake. I had many more ahead of me. Over the next few months, Diane perfected the art of polite cruelty. She never yelled or made obvious insults. Instead, she wrapped her attacks in false concern. "Riley, sweetheart, are you sure teaching is enough to support a family? I just worry about Brandon's future," said with a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That top is so bold. You're braver than I am about trying new styles." Translation: You look ridiculous. Your parents seem simple. In the best way, of course. There's something refreshing about people who are happy with less. Each word carefully chosen to sting. The worst part was how she did it in front of others. Family, friends, neighbors, even waiters. She would make these comments just loud enough for people to hear, then act surprised if I looked hurt. "Oh, honey, you're so sensitive. I was just making conversation." Brandon would nod along. "Mom doesn't mean anything by it, babe. That's just how she talks." But I started noticing that she never talked to anyone else this way. Her cutting remarks were reserved specifically for me. I began to dread family gatherings. My stomach would twist for days beforehand, wondering what new way she'd find to make me feel small. Everything changed the day I overheard the phone call. I was in Brandon's apartment, waiting for him to get ready for dinner. His phone rang in the kitchen while he was in the shower. "Brandon? Oh, it's Riley. He's in the shower, but I can take a message." Don't bother, just tell him I called. Diane's voice was cold, dismissive. Different from her usual fake sweetness. But then she kept talking, apparently thinking she'd hung up, but the call was still connected. I heard her dial another number. Patricia? Yes, it's me. I was just calling Brandon. No, she answered. The girlfriend. A pause. He'll do what I say. He always does. This little romance will run its course and then we can get back to normal. Her laugh was sharp. She's temporary, trust me. Brandon knows what side his bread is buttered on. When I told Brandon about it later, he actually laughed. Mom was probably just venting. She gets worked up sometimes. You're reading too much into it. I stared at him. She called me temporary. She said you do what she says. For a moment something flickered across his face. Anger maybe, or hurt. He straightened up, and I hoped he was finally going to defend me. You know what? That's not okay. I should call her and... Then his phone buzzed. A text from Diane. Dinner Sunday? Made your favorite. Brandon glanced at the message and I watched the fight drain out of him. He shrugged. She's my mother. She worries, but she doesn't control my life. The words sounded convincing, but his eyes shifted away when he said them. That was the moment I should have known. When someone shows you they'll choose comfort over courage, believe them. When Brandon proposed, I thought everything would change. We were at the beach where we'd had our first date. The sunset was perfect. His speech was beautiful. The ring was exactly what I would have chosen. But the moment we announced our engagement, Diane's mask slipped completely. The fake smiles disappeared. The pretense of liking me evaporated. Well, she said when Brandon called to share the news. I suppose congratulations are in order. Her voice was flat, defeated, like someone had just told her bad news. At the engagement party she insisted on hosting, she introduced me to guests as Brandon's fiancé. The pause before the word was deliberate, pointed, like she couldn't quite believe she had to say it. She spent the evening telling stories about Brandon's ex-girlfriend Stephanie. Such a lovely girl, so accomplished. Her father owns 3 hotels, you know. She speaks French fluently. Each story was a comparison I was clearly losing. Brandon said nothing. When I mentioned it later, he sighed. She liked Stephanie, give her time to adjust. But I was starting to understand that time wouldn't fix this. Diane didn't just dislike me. She saw me as a threat to something bigger. Her control over her son. Her vision of his future. Her place as the most important woman in his life. The wedding planning became a battlefield disguised as generosity. Diane offered to help pay for the wedding, which seemed like an olive branch. I was hopeful. Maybe we could bond over cake tastings and flower arrangements. Of course, if we're contributing financially, we'll need some input on the decisions, she said sweetly. Just to make sure everything is appropriate. Within a week, she had taken over everything. The guest list grew from 75 to 150, mostly her friends and distant relatives I'd never met. She changed the venue from the garden center I loved to an expensive country club. This is more suitable for our family, she explained. You understand. She picked the flowers, the music, even the menu. When I tried to object, she'd smile and say, Dear, you have such unique ideas, but this is what people expect at a wedding like this. Brandon was useless. Just let her handle it. She's good at this stuff, and it's not worth the drama. I realized I was planning a wedding that had nothing to do with me. I was becoming a guest at my own ceremony. The final straw was when she tried to invite my ex-boss instead of my sister's boyfriend. We need to keep the guest list classy, she said. I finally understood. She was rewriting my entire identity. The dress shopping trip was supposed to be special. Diane insisted on coming along with my mother and sister. She arrived an hour late, which should have been my first warning. I had found the perfect dress. Elegant but not flashy. Beautiful but not overwhelming. It made me feel confident and beautiful. My mom actually teared up when she saw me in it. Oh honey, you look stunning, my sister whispered. Then Diane spoke up from the corner where she'd been scrolling through her phone. It's a little much for someone like you, don't you think? Very ambitious. The room went quiet. The consultant looked confused. My mother's smile faltered. I think it's gorgeous on her, my mom said carefully. Diane stood and walked around me like I was a sculpture she was critiquing. It's a lovely dress, but Riley needs something more suitable, more modest. something that doesn't try so hard. I stood there in this beautiful dress that made me feel like a princess, listening to my future mother-in-law tell me I wasn't worthy of it, that I was reaching above my station, trying too hard to be something I wasn't. I changed back into my regular clothes, but the damage was done. She had poisoned the moment completely. The final insult came when she suggested streamlining my side of the guest list. We were reviewing the seating chart when she casually mentioned it. "I've been thinking, dear. Your family is quite large, and some of your friends seem a bit casual for this kind of event. Perhaps we could reduce your guest count to keep things classy." She wanted me to uninvite my aunt, who helped raise me, my college roommate, who'd been my maid of honor in her first wedding, my cousin who was flying in from Seattle. They might feel uncomfortable at such an elegant venue, she continued. We'd want them to feel out of place. When I brought this to Brandon, he was watching football and barely looked up. "It's not worth fighting over, babe. It's just one day. Your family will understand." Just one day. The most important day of our lives, and he thought my family's presence wasn't worth fighting for. I realized he had already chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had become so small, how I had let someone convince me that the people I loved weren't good enough, that I wasn't good enough. The rehearsal dinner seating chart was my final wake-up call. Diane handed me the layout 2 days before the dinner, like it was already decided. I stared at the paper in disbelief. She had seated me at table 7, next to Brandon's great-aunt, who was mostly deaf, and a family friend I'd met exactly once. Brandon was at the head table with the wedding party and immediate family. "There must be a mistake," I said. "I'm sitting away from Brandon?" She looked confused, like I'd asked why water was wet. "Oh dear, tradition is that the bride and groom sit with their respective families during the rehearsal dinner. It's more proper that way." But Brandon's sister was sitting next to her husband at table 2. His cousin was next to his wife at table 4. Suddenly, this tradition applied only to me. I showed the chart to my mom, who went pale. "Honey, this isn't right. You should be sitting with Brandon." When I confronted Diane about it, she sighed dramatically. "If you're going to be difficult about every little tradition, planning this wedding will be impossible." I wasn't being difficult. I was being erased, systematically removed from my own wedding celebration while everyone pretended it was normal, even generous. That night, I knew something had to change. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I went to Brandon's apartment early to help him get ready. He was in the shower when his phone rang. Diane's voice filled the kitchen through the speaker. "Brandon, is she there?" "No, Mom. She's picking up her dress. What's wrong?" "I just need you to be prepared for tomorrow night. If she embarrasses herself at the dinner, this will all take care of itself. People will see what I see." My hands started shaking as I listened. "What do you mean?" Brandon's voice was cautious. "She doesn't understand our world, sweetheart. She's gonna feel uncomfortable, out of place. When she acts awkward or says something inappropriate, people will notice, and you'll realize I was right about her." There was a long pause. "Mom, I don't want her to be embarrassed." "Oh, I'm not trying to embarrass her. She'll do that herself. I've just arranged things to highlight the differences between her and us." I realized she hadn't just planned my seating. She had orchestrated an entire evening designed to make me fail, to prove I didn't belong. And she was counting on my humiliation to change Brandon's mind. I crept out of the apartment before he finished his shower. When I tried to talk to Brandon about what I'd heard, he made me feel crazy. "You're being paranoid, Riley. My mother doesn't plot against people. She's direct, sure, but she's not manipulative." "Brandon, I heard her. She said she arranged things to highlight our differences." He rubbed his forehead like I was giving him a headache. "You're taking everything she says in the worst possible way. Maybe you're just nervous about the wedding and looking for problems." That word, nervous, hit like a slap. He was using his mother's language, making my legitimate concerns sound like female hysteria. "I'm not imagining this. She seated me away from you on purpose. She's been undermining me for months." "You're being emotional," he said finally. "You're overthinking everything." Emotional, overthinking. the classic words men use when they want women to doubt their own perceptions. I realized Brandon had been trained well by his mother. When faced with uncomfortable truth, gaslight the messenger. That night, I stopped trying to convince him. I stopped defending myself. I stopped explaining what was obvious to everyone, except the two people who mattered most. Instead, I started making a different kind of plan. I wasn't supposed to hear the ultimatum, but I was in the bathroom when Diane cornered Brandon at the country club final walkthrough. "This has gone far enough, Brandon. It's time to choose." "Mom, we're getting married tomorrow. Can we not do this now?" "That's exactly why we need to do this now, before you make the biggest mistake of your life." Her voice was sharp, urgent. "It's her or me, your future or your past. You can't have both." Through the bathroom door, I waited for his response. The man I loved, the man I was marrying in 24 hours, faced with the simplest choice in the world. Silence. "I raised you better than this," she continued. "You know what kind of woman belongs in this family. She's not it." More silence. "Brandon, answer me. Are you choosing her over your own mother?" Finally he spoke. I just need time to think." Time to think. About whether to choose his fiancé or his mother. About whether our entire relationship was worth defending. About whether I deserved his loyalty. I stayed in that bathroom for 10 more minutes, crying as quietly as possible. When I finally came out, they were both gone. But I had heard everything I needed to hear. Driving home that night, everything became crystal clear. The wedding wasn't the problem. The family wasn't the problem. The problem was that I had been fighting for a man who wouldn't fight for me. For 8 months, I had been trying to prove I was worthy of a family that had already decided I wasn't. I had been seeking approval from a woman who saw me as the enemy. I had been waiting for my fiancé to protect me from attacks he pretended not to see. But the real issue wasn't Diane's cruelty. It was Brandon's cowardice. He could have stopped this at any time. One conversation with his mother. One moment of standing up for the woman he claimed to love. Instead, he chose the path of least resistance. Keep the peace. Don't rock the boat. Let his mother terrorize me while he played the helpless bystander. I realized the wedding would be the same. 20 years from now, when Diane criticized how I raised our children or undermined my parenting decisions, Brandon would say, "That's just how she is. Don't take it personally." Silence was his weapon of choice. And I was done being its target. I spent the morning of the rehearsal dinner not getting my hair done or picking up my dress. Instead, I sat in my apartment writing notes on index cards. Not angry rants, not accusations, just simple facts. Things that were said, things that were done, things that were ignored. I practiced in the mirror until my voice was calm and clear. I wasn't going to scream or cry or give Diane the emotional breakdown she was counting on. I was going to do something much more powerful. I was going to tell the truth. My phone buzzed constantly. Brandon wondering where I was. My maid of honor asking of pickup times. My mother checking on last-minute details. I answered each text calmly. "Running a little behind. See you tonight." By 5 o'clock, I was ready. I put on the blue dress I'd bought for the engagement party, the one Diane had said made me look trying too hard. Tonight, I wanted to try hard. I wanted to look like someone who knew her own worth. I drove to the country club with my heart surprisingly steady. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of what Diane might say or do. I had a plan of my own now. The country club looked perfect. Diane had excellent taste, I had to admit. White linens, crystal glasses, and flowers that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She stood near the entrance in a navy dress, greeting guests like the queen of the evening. She spotted me immediately, and her smile was triumphant. She thought she had won. She thought tonight would be my public breakdown, my final humiliation. She thought Brandon would see me fail and realize she was right about me. "Riley, dear, you look..." She paused as if searching for a diplomatic word. "Festive." The guests were arriving. Brandon's law firm colleagues, his college friends, family members I barely knew. All dressed in expensive clothes, all speaking in the confident voices of people who belonged. I found my assigned seat at table 7, between the deaf great-aunt and the family friend who kept calling me Rebecca, despite 3 corrections. Brandon was at the head table, looking handsome and nervous. When our eyes met across the room, he smiled and waved, like everything was normal. Like this was just another family dinner, instead of a carefully orchestrated demonstration of my inadequacy. Diane clinked her glass. "Welcome everyone to Brandon and Riley's rehearsal dinner." Diane's speech began innocently enough. She talked about Brandon's childhood, his accomplishments, her pride in the man he'd become. The room listened with warm attention. Then she shifted. "And Riley? Well, Riley is certainly a work in progress." Polite laughter rippled through the room. "She's learning so much about our family traditions, about our way of doing things. It's been educational for all of us." The laughter was louder now. I felt my cheeks burn, but I kept my face neutral. Of course, adjusting to our family can be challenging. We have certain standards, certain expectations. Not everyone is equipped to meet them immediately, but we have faith that with time and guidance, people can improve. She was calling me a charity case in front of 60 people. A fixer-upper project that Brandon had kindly taken on. The room was eating it up, chuckling at my expense. Brandon sat frozen, his smile plastic and strained. He was watching his mother humiliate his fiancé, and he was doing absolutely nothing. I stood up slowly. Every conversation in the room stopped. Diane's eyes flashed with surprise, then delight. She thought I was about to have a meltdown. "Thank you, Diane. May I have just 1 minute?" The room was completely silent. 60 pairs of eyes focused on me, some curious, some sympathetic, some clearly expecting entertainment. I looked around the room calmly, making eye contact with as many people as possible. My voice was steady when I spoke. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Before we continue, I want to share something with you." Diane's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the script she'd written. 8 months ago, I met an amazing man who made me believe I could be part of an incredible family. I was excited to learn your traditions, to earn your respect, to build relationships that would last a lifetime. Murmurs of approval from the crowd. This sounded like the grateful future daughter-in-law speech they expected. But I've learned something important over these months. I've learned the difference between being welcomed into a family and being tolerated by one, between being included and being tested, between being loved and being managed. The murmurs stopped. I had their full attention now. "Tonight I want you to hear some specific examples of what I mean." Diane's face went pale. She started to stand, but I continued before she could interrupt. This was my moment. No anger, no drama, just truth. I pulled out my first index card. My hands weren't shaking anymore. 3 weeks ago, Diane told me that my chosen wedding dress was too much for someone like me. Yesterday, she suggested reducing my family's guest list to keep things classy. This morning, she expressed concern that my relatives might feel uncomfortable at an elegant venue. I looked directly at her. "Diane, you've spent 8 months telling me, both directly and indirectly, that I'm not good enough for this family. That my background is too simple, my job too humble, my family too ordinary." The room was dead silent now. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others were staring at Diane with new recognition. But here's what troubles me most. When I brought these concerns to my fiancé, I was told I was being too sensitive and emotional, that I was overthinking obvious slights. I looked at Brandon, who was now pale as his mother. I'd been made to doubt my own perceptions, to question whether obvious insults were actually insults, to wonder if asking for basic respect was asking for too much. Diane shot to her feet. "This is completely inappropriate. You're mischaracterizing friendly advice as—" "Let me finish," I said firmly. For once, my voice was louder than hers. Diane's interruption had done exactly what I hoped it would. Her mask was slipping in front of everyone. "You want to characterize months of systematic criticism as friendly advice?" I asked. "Let me share some more examples." I read from my second card. 2 months ago, you suggested my career as a teacher wasn't enough to support a family. Last month, you called my parents simple people who are happy with less. Yesterday, you rearranged the seating chart to place me away from Brandon at our own rehearsal dinner. Gasps from several tables. People were looking around at the seating arrangement, noticing for the first time how wrong it was. "And this week, I overheard you tell someone that if I embarrass myself tonight, this will all take care of itself." Diane's face was now red. "That's a complete misunderstanding of a private conversation. Was it private? Or were you planning my humiliation?" The room was buzzing now. Uncomfortable conversations were breaking out at several tables. People were putting pieces together. Diane's voice rose sharply, her composure completely gone. "You ungrateful little?" She caught herself, but not before everyone heard the venom in her voice. Then, in her flustered state, she said the quiet part out loud. "I have spent 30 years building this family's reputation, and I won't let some nobody teacher destroy what I've worked for." The room went dead silent. And suddenly, I understood. This had never been about class or worthiness or family standards. This was about a woman who saw me as competition for control over her son, and she was willing to destroy me to keep it. "Thank you," I said calmly. "That's the real voice I've been hearing for 8 months, the one my fiancé told me I was imagining." The dam had burst. Once Diane's composure cracked, other people found their voices. Brandon's cousin Emma spoke up from table 3. "Diane, I heard you call her temporary at the engagement party." His college friend Tom nodded. "You told my wife that Riley doesn't understand our kind of people." My sister, who had been quiet until now, stood at table 5. "You asked me if our family had behavioral issues that Brandon should know about." More voices joined in. Small comments that had seemed odd at the time suddenly formed a clear pattern. Diane had been conducting a months-long campaign to turn people against me, assuming no one would ever compare notes. "These are all misunderstandings," Diane said, but her voice was shrill now, defensive, taken out of context. "What context makes asking about our family's behavioral issues appropriate?" my mother asked quietly. Brandon finally spoke, but his words made everything worse. "Everyone please calm down, this is getting blown out of proportion. Mom's just protective, and Riley's been under a lot of stress." There it was. Even now, faced with overwhelming evidence, he was defending his mother and explaining away my reactions. He was choosing her, just like he always had. I looked at Brandon across the room. This was his moment to finally stand up, to finally choose the woman he was supposed to marry over the mother who was destroying her. "Brandon," I said quietly, "do you believe what these people are telling you? Do you believe me?" He looked around the room at 60 faces waiting for his answer. At his cousin and his friend who had corroborated my story. At my family, who had witnessed months of careful cruelty. I think everyone is just misunderstanding each other. Mom doesn't mean things the way they sound, and you're both strong women who just need to find a way to get along." Both strong women. Like this was a personality conflict between equals instead of systematic emotional abuse. So when your mother spent 8 months telling me I wasn't good enough for this family, that was a misunderstanding? She never said that. When she rearranged our rehearsal dinner to isolate me from you, that was just different communication styles? You're making it sound worse than it is. I felt something break inside me. Not my heart, that had been breaking slowly for months, something deeper. My last hope that the man I loved might finally see me clearly. "No, Brandon. I'm making it sound exactly as bad as it is, and you're still choosing not to see it." I reached into my purse and pulled out the engagement ring. The diamond caught the light from the chandelier, sparkling like it had the day he proposed. "I want to thank everyone for helping me understand something important tonight. I've learned that marriage isn't just about loving someone, it's about building a life with someone who will stand beside you when things get difficult." Brandon stood up from the head table. "Riley, don't do this. We can work this out." "No, we can't. Because working it out would require you to acknowledge that it happened in the first place." I walked across the room toward him, the ring in my palm. The room was completely silent, except for the sound of my heels on the hardwood floor. "You're a good man, Brandon. But you're not ready to be a husband. Not to me, not to anyone who might threaten your mother's position in your life." I placed the ring on the head table in front of him. "I won't compete for your loyalty anymore, and I won't accept being treated as less than I am." I turned to address the room one final time. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm sorry the evening didn't go as planned, but I'm grateful for the truth that came out." I looked directly at Diane. "Thank you for showing me who you really are, and who he really is." I walked out of that country club with my head high, leaving behind a room full of shocked silence. Behind me, I could hear the explosion beginning. Raised voices, heated arguments, the sound of a family imploding. Within a week, the fallout was spectacular. Emma, Brandon's cousin, called to tell me that 3 other family members had confronted Diane about her behavior. His college friends were asking Brandon pointed questions about why he'd never defended me. The wedding vendors had to be cancelled. The country club kept the deposit. Diane's friends were questioning her version of events now that they'd witnessed her mask slip in public. Brandon called 17 times the first day. His voicemails went from angry to pleading to desperate. He wanted to talk things through and find a compromise. But there was no compromise possible. Either he would defend his wife from his mother's cruelty, or he wouldn't. After 8 months of evidence, he had made his choice clear. His family was in chaos. His mother's reputation in their social circle was damaged. His relationship with his extended family was strained. People were taking sides, and many of them weren't taking his. I had been worried that standing up would make me the villain. Instead, it had revealed the villain who was already there. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new apartment, writing this story for you. The sunlight streams through windows that I chose in a space that belongs entirely to me. I'm dating again. His name is Andrew, and when his mother made a mildly critical comment about my job at our first meeting, he immediately said, "Mom, that's not appropriate. Riley's career is important and valuable." It was such a small thing, but it meant everything. He showed me what protection looks like, what partnership feels like. I heard through mutual friends that Brandon and Diane's relationship is still strained. She lost control when her manipulation was exposed publicly, and he's apparently struggling with seeing her clearly for the first time. I don't feel angry anymore. I don't feel victorious. I feel grateful. I didn't ruin their family. I simply refused to let them ruin me. If you're reading this and something feels familiar, if you're doubting your own perceptions or being told you're too sensitive, trust yourself. Love shouldn't require you to shrink. Partnership shouldn't mean fighting for respect. I learned that day that walking away isn't failure. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. And sometimes the life you build after walking away is infinitely better than the one you almost settled for. I saved myself. And in the end, that's exactly what I needed to do.